Huh.
Let's have a picnic in here.
Yeah. Okay.
Get that sign on right there.
Oh.
Get that sign.
Chloe, you got the picture.
So this is actually the second entrance to Lincoln Caverns. First is along the highway, which we won't be walking on since there's quite a lot of cars in the highway. And it was discovered in 1930 when they were blasting for the highway. And it took about 13 months to install the railings, stairs, and most of the pathways we'll be walking on today. Until it was then opened in 1931. However, this being the second entrance was opened in 1984, and they blasted through about 17 feet of rock to get to an opening in the cave. So, this right here is not real rock, it's a brown concrete called gunite. You want to touch anything? Touch this, since you're not allowed to touch once you get inside the caves. And heading in, masks are required. There's one step right here in front of the door, and it gets a little low in this first passageway. So as we're heading in, watch your step and watch your heads. And if the last person in could close this door for me, that'd be great.
Thank you, Daddy. Can't see him smiling. What's your step? I got the picture.
Multiple mysteries. The first of which being, they didn't initially know this room was here. It was actually discovered about 7 years after the rest of the cave, when Myron Dunleavy Sr., the owner at the time, was exploring this area down here, which used to entirely be cave clay. The way that he'd explore, he'd take a pole, much like the ones we use for our railings, and stick it through the clay. He knew if he was hitting something hard, it was a formation or a wall, but if he kept going, he knew he was just hitting clay, and he was free to continue digging. The next mystery occurred when he first popped his head out of that clay. He saw about 100 pairs of eyes looking back at him from up there. Any of you like to take a guess as to what those could have been?
Bats?
Yeah. So we had about 100 bats in the cave, and the mystery wasn't necessarily what were they, but if he was taking the first and only to get into this room, how were those bats already in here? The answer to that is actually this hole right up here. That hole goes all the way up to the surface and is called the cave chimney. It may look pretty wide here, but up on the surface, it's only about the size of a quarter, since the bats that we have in this area, their bodies are only about the size of my thumb. We most likely won't be seeing any bats today, the main reason being, a couple years back, we had a disease pass through this area called white nose syndrome. It was a fungus that would grow on the bats' noses. It would itch them awake during their hibernation, so they'd scratch all winter long, use up all their food and energy. They wouldn't have enough to last through the winter. First year it hit us, we saw our hundreds of bats go down to zero, and the bat population in the area declined about 90%. We're back up now to about 5 or 6 bats, which of course isn't a lot, but compared to that zero, it's a great sign. It means things are improving, and we look forward to seeing the bat population numbers increase in the coming years. The other reason is because it's still summer, it's not when they usually choose to hibernate in caves. And our final mystery in this room is this structure right here. You can probably see it's broken, and that was about half of the mystery, was how did this structure break? But the other half of the original mystery was, where were the pieces? It'd be pretty reasonable to expect they'd be on the ground in front of it, maybe even behind it in the clay, but we actually couldn't find them for years until we found them at the end of the tunnel we just came through. We still don't know how it broke in the first place, or how the pieces traveled all the way over there, but they have since been moved to lay in front of this broken column. Do any of you have any questions? And if you're ready, our next stop is at the bottom of these stairs behind me. These are unfortunately the worst stairs that we have in either of our caves, since there are 2 steps in the middle that get steeper than the rest. There's no good reason for it, just as we're heading down, watch your step, use the railings if you need them, and we'll be heading down. So, watch your step here.
Don't touch flower. Ikaw, kuha, ikaw ba? Oh, kunoon, matangkak. Kuha, ikaw ba?
No.
Actually, I'd like to try and get you folks off the steps. Sorry. This room is called the sand pit because we may be walking on gravel today. When they had first gotten into this room, it was covered with a layer of sand, since this room had a tendency to flood, especially since they opened that second entrance. Anytime it rained, the water would collect in this room and bring with it all sorts of sand, silt, and debris. And that's one of the reasons that you folks have a big hole behind you. And so, that was originally a dig to try and find more parts of the cave, but it became too unsafe to send workers down there, so that now just serves for drainage purposes.
What's this room over here?
How will be leaving? Our cave's a big circle.
Oh.
This rock that's above the hole is limestone. Limestone's formed with crushed up bits of sea creature shells. Of course, we've never had to swim to get into this room, unless you count being about ankle deep in rainwater. And that's because that limestone is formed about 375 million